Greek DNA found in Native American Indians of North America. The Cretan-Minoan DNA, that is from the island of Crete of the Minoan Empire, and there's an explanation for this. Now, I always wondered why there were so many Greek words in locations in the United States. One of them, as we all know, is the Potomac River. Potomac means a river in Greek, potami, and many other words. Now, also in their names, Geronimo is a Greek name, Hieronymos. And we have evidence of artifacts as well, the triremes that the Greeks had, the ancient Greeks. Designs of triremes have been found in artifacts in North America, this one here from the area of Lake Michigan. And we also have areas of copper mining, Lake Superior. We also have these here, they look like hoplites, as the plitos, the ancient Greek warriors with their helmets. These are artifacts found in North America. So what's going on? What's the explanation? I'm translating this from a Greek article. It said that the Minoans, from Crete that is, were vicious, very capable seafarers, even crossing the Atlantic, establishing colonies as far as Canada and exploiting the local copper mines. As we know, the Great Lakes are one of the biggest copper deposits of the world. Now, it was very easy for the Greeks to travel there, and I'll tell you why before I start this. I have a video on the Spartans getting all the way up to Scotland. Did you know the Scots were Spartans, were ancient Greeks from Sparta? Yes, the Scots and the Irish, and from the tribe of Dan. The Spartans were from the tribe of Dan, and they have gone all the way up to Scotland and even Scandinavia. Denmark is from Dan, the tribe of Dan. But the ancient Greeks had shipping routes going all the way up to the British Isles. It was not a very difficult thing to do. They would stop after traveling every day, and they would stop at various locations for trade. And this is even written in the Holy Bible, in the Old Testament. We even know that Joseph of Arimathea, who was a high priest of ancient Israel at the time of our Lord Jesus Christ, he was an uncle of our Lord Jesus Christ. And he used to have a shipping company, and he would trade things from Israel, such as olives and tropical fruits and wine and ceramic utensils, and he would bring back tin from Britain, tin utensils. So that was his trade. So it was from there, from going all along the western part of Europe, going on towards the British Isles. From there, they would go to Iceland. From Iceland, they would go across to Greenland. From Greenland, they would go across to Labrador of Canada, and then come down from there. So that was a very easy way for them to get to Canada from there. That's the route that they were taking. And it could be that at that time, we don't know how the Earth changed. It could have been either drier, because of the mini ice age, which means that the sea levels were lower, which means that there was more shoreline, making the distances by ship a lot less. Or even if they were as they were today, they would still be able to take that route. Now, going back to this article, while the present of this place is plagued by frustration, its past does not stop us from finding it fascinating. There are so many surprises, even if it's carved in granite. So it's unsurprising. The rocks of Scandinavia, North America, ancestors of the Cretans that strolled across the Atlantic and milking the wealth of the Baltic and the American 40 whole centuries before Columbus reached that land. Now, under what conditions this could happen is something that common sense would easily rank in post-scientific philology and naturalistic fiction. But before you succumb to the ease of rejection, take a look at the accumulated evidence. Step tracked them for you. Now, it's not been many years since I first met from the late University of Patras Professor Anthony Kondaratos about the possibility that ancient Greeks might have reached America looking for new sources of metals. And I admit I smiled at that time, thinking of all the amazing things I had read about ancient Greeks in South America, Australia, Japan, even Micronesia, which is, by the way, a Greek word. And I would hold on to this theory if I didn't learn about a recent book by Gavin Menzies, The Lost Empire of Atlantis, that resurrected the subject and sparked a plethora of online discussions. And in his book, Menzies first follows the traces of the Minoans in Asia Minor, Egypt, Yemen, India, Ceylon, and where the Tamil Sangam epics still speak of the wonderful ships of gold carrying gold and leaving loaded peppers. And spice, yes, the spice pepper. Astonished by the museum findings that justified Strabo and Ptolemy, the author pondered on not only the secrets of navigation that the Minoans had to possess, but also where they found all those quantities of metal that they traded. Cyprus, as we know, Cyprus means copper. Cyprus has a lot of copper mines and has historically been known that it could not even meet the demands of the pharaohs. So they had to get their copper from somewhere else. The Minoans gave them tin-reinforced bronze saws to cut the blocks for their pyramids, and it was found written in the archives of King Sargon of Arcadia. Minoan ships were brought in as early as 2350 BC. They brought tin from Spain and Britain. Here we go. As we said, even at the time of our Lord Jesus Christ, his uncle, the high priest Saint Joseph of Arimathea, his shipping company would bring tin from Britain and Spain, I guess. Now, and then, unlike the unlikely find of 1450 BC, where did you come from, Akrotiri and Santorini, Lysioderma sericorne, that is a caterpillar of tobacco leaves. So the tobacco we knew came from Europe in the 16th century and from the American continent. So Menzies turned west, now looking to find out how those sailors had not only crossed the gates of the Heraclean gates, which is Gibraltar, but they had also reached the New World. The myth that unfolded in the rest of his book, this 72-year-old former British Navy officer, was unprecedented. 2 years ago, both on the net on NET channel and in news, a peer professor of geology at the University of Athens and a member of the Central Archaeological Council named Elias Mariolakos had supported the idea that our ancient ancestors had explored the coastal areas of Spain, France, Britain, and Britain for Britain and Ireland. They had arrived into Iceland and Greenland, and then from there to the continent of America, by Labrador, obviously. That's the detail. Mr. Mariolakos' reasoning was quoted in a paper published online in Estia Copper, Mariolakos, concerning copper. Now, where he first explains how a geologist deals with such a subject. Quote, geomythology is a branch of geosciences that deals with the geological conditions prevailing during the mythological age, and through this analysis finds the interrelationship between geology and mythology. My own experience as a geologist who has spent his life studying the geology of Greece has shown that Greek mythology also includes physiological processes that take place in very remote areas, such as in the North Atlantic and elsewhere. Quote, he then analyzes in detail the ancient sources he examined, such as Plutarch's work on the appearing face on the moon, end quote. The suspicious mines in the mining of geological minerals. Skeptical, I searched for him to give me proof. From what he told me, I concluded that there were two keys that unlocked the Greeks in America case. One was a metallurgical inexplicable. U.S. archaeologists have found 5,000 open copper mines almost completely cleaned out on the shores of Lake Superior between Michigan, United States, and Canada, from where some 500,000 tons have been extracted between the year 2470 BC and 1050 BC, that nobody knew where they went. Where did all this copper go to? 500,000 tons of copper. Specifically, the Indians of these areas lived in the Stone Age. Only after 1500 BC started using limited quantities of copper, and only for their jewelry. So who was the thief, and where did he come from, and how? Since the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia were the ones going through the Bronze Age, and copper was then more expensive than gold, the suspicions are shifting here. In a striking juncture, mysterious massive copper mines in both North America and Spain and Britain were halted. They stopped around 1350 BC, at a time when the volcano of Hydra, that's the Santorini volcano, determined the fates of the Cretes, the Minoans from Crete, and the Greeks who took over the baton, the Mycenaeans first, the Dorians and the Ionians afterwards, are the only ones to recount trips from Old to Iceland and the Crone Sea to the west coast. For how they went, the answer could only be given by the key called knowledge of the ocean currents. The ocean currents that Homer described as deep and Vathidan, very, very deep. The Gulf Stream, the famous Gulf Stream, it winds its way across the Atlantic and branches into loops that penetrate the Mediterranean and the Baltic. Anyone who knows these waters slides and properly places his ship on them and flies. For example, says Marianas, Plutarch decided that a hail like the Argo could cover 900, a ship like the Argos could cover 900 kilometers of Britain, Iceland in 5 days. That's at 4 to 5 miles an hour. Isn't that something? And now we talk about Minoan cruises on the Sea of Kronos. Minoan words and sketches of ships await their explanation on the rocks off the Baltic coast. Minoan words, that is, the words of ancient Crete, and sketches of ships await their explanation on the rocks off the Baltic coast. Professor Mariolakos' arguments were impressive and seemed reasonable to me, but the unbelievable achievement could only be met with evidence that archaic ships like Argos could go so far, let alone the more ancient Minoan ships. And I remember a 2010 report by a Norwegian newspaper that mysterious letters from the period of 1800 and 1000 BC have been found carved in granite. These letters were deciphered as Minoan letters, that is, ancient Greek, by the Norwegian linguist and academic Geology, and he was honored with the King's Gold Medal. According to Artun, the Minoan words were translated as saying, quote, soft and pure, unquote, referring to the largest silver deposit in Europe that these incredible treasure hunters had located at Oslo's Kronsberg, but had they left other traces behind them there? I asked Dr. Minas Tsikritsis, who had recently identified the Minoan clay navigation computer. Our contact questioned Artun's interpretation, but he was certain that it was Minoan, as a recent study added support to Professor Mariolakos' theory of crossing the ocean, and he specifically told me. And what Plutarch has to say about Greeks in Canada. Plutarch writes, As for the great continent, from which the Great Sea is in circulation, it is less distant from the other islands, but from Zygia, about 5,000 feet by sailing ships. From the mainland, the adjacent parts are inhabited by Greeks, around a bay no less than Meotis Lake, whose mouth is in the same line as the mouth of the Caspian Sea. Now, the distances between Greenland, Newfoundland, and Baffin Island in Canada are approximately 1,140 kilometers, while between Newfoundland and Baffin Island is approximately 1,300 kilometers. The report that Greeks reside around the bay shows us a colony in the Bay of St. Lawrence, just basically around St. Lawrence River area, around Montreal and Quebec and all that. That's amazing. Anyway, going back to this. But the important thing in this description is that it provides us with geographic information that is correct. Indeed, the Bay of St. Lawrence resembles Lake Meotis, the Azov Sea in the Black Sea, and is slightly larger. As for the information that the Gulf is in the same line as the Caspian, looking at Google Earth, we can easily see that the two orifices are 47 degrees north, so they are both in the same line. This information is also the only reference to the ancient secretariat that shows us that at that time they could determine the latitude of a place. But there is still something that Plutarch that I consider to be true evidence of American travel. So what is that? This is what he says, quote, "So when the star of Saturn, whom we call Phaethon, while they are at night, arrives at Tarsus after a period of 30 years, after much preparation for the sacrifice, to begin the journey of return. This enables us to ascertain astronomically the period that the particular journey that narrates may have taken place. Plato had classified the planets in their solar system in order for the outside inward to the Earth, in the following manners, looking: Saturn, Phaethon is Jupiter, Pyrenta is Mars, Phosphorus is Venus, Polishing is Mercury, the Sun, and the Moon. The name looking etymologically means one who becomes visible, while the word nocturus means one who is last in the night. And using a special astronomy program, I checked in Canada's geographical coordinates for the time of Plutarch, 1st century AD, on what date and in which month Saturn was in the constellation of Taurus before the sun rose. I've confirmed that every 30 lunar years there is indeed the phenomenon of Saturn rising to Taurus." Then again, Plutarch says, quote, "The islands beyond are inhabited by Greeks, and they see the sun hiding for less than an hour for 30 days. And at night there is still darkness, and darkness glowing from the west. Since the return trip started in early June, then we need to check where they saw the sun hiding for less than an hour for 30 days. With a proper program, I found that at the time of the 1st century, e.g. in Greenland, 60th north, the sun was setting for 1 hour between 4 and 5 a.m., and that was for a month from the 9th of June to the 9th of July. This identification indicates that they originally traveled north, reaching the Arctic Circle, where the sea was called the Kronos Sea. In this area, the night is really dark and light dark. The astronomical connection combined with the geographical knowledge of the two places that have the same latitude show that Plutarch's journey from America to Carthage in 86 AD, and it really happened. The reasoning was shocking, but it kept me going as we measured the data of a trip to the Roman era, a time when travelers might have had an Antikythera mechanism with them at sea. Quote, "What evidence did we have that Minoan ships made the trip? Surprises from the Vikings' country may have given the answer. Traces and intrigues in the New World." Incredible collection of soldiers and tanks in Illinois, but is it true? It was left to find no corresponding evidence on the shores of St. Lawrence or Lake Superior to accept the unlikely Minoans, the people from the ancient Cretes, in America. Mencius describes such about 1,200 Minoan finds around Lake Superior, so I went to find them. 1,200 artifacts. There are indeed many findings. The earliest evidence of non-Indian mining was found in copper veins in the Cretan Peninsula of Lake Superior, near the village called Laurium. Now the Cretan fault we know is, we talked about that many times, that's a mid-continental rift, the Cretan Rift, and that's the horse-shaped mantle plume that straddles over the Great Lakes, and then the western part of it goes into Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, which is all magma underneath, okay? And that's why all this Great Lakes area is so full of fantastic metal. So they found the copper veins on the Cretan Peninsula of Lake Superior near the village called Laurium. There too was found the petroglyph of highly symbolic Minoan ships. So also in Newberry, Michigan, by 1896, 3 statues and a strange writing, the sign had been found. No one could interpret it then, but when Evans excavated Knossos of Crete in 1900, it became apparent that the writing was related to linear A, but the plethora of pictorial elements referred to the Mediterranean were then found in private hands, with most ending up in unknown collectors, and many gold and silver rumored to have been melted away by their greedy predators. Most were found in 1925 by an Illinois farmer, Orville Lowery, and in 1982 by an adventurer named Russ Burroughs, who claimed to have found a sanctuary and 13 sanctuaries in a cave complex, also in Illinois. To conclude and summarize, the internet listed finds on American soil include numerous stones engraved on the figures of soldiers in uniforms reminiscent of ancient Minoans, ancient Philistines, ancient Mycenaeans from the Peloponnese. The Mycenaeans are, of course, the Spartans. Phoenicians and Egyptians, many of them Egyptian and Egyptian crypto-Cypro-Minoan writing, and in other words, mixed with Etruscan, Latin, and Greek words. But the most elaborate visual element, if proved authentic, is a medal found in Cleveland, Ohio in 2006, with a Minoan sculpture on one side and the Prince of Lilies on the other, as we know from the fresco painting of Knossos Palace of 1690. The issue became more complicated when the Indiana Jones bronze was approached by Mormon archaeologists on the side of the Church of the Mormons, who fought to justify their prophetic saying that America had been colonized by Jews around 2000 BC. An incredible carousel has been erected ever since, with all sorts of interpretations of the findings popping up in ancient American scientific journal, while official archaeology is far from over. This paradoxical situation has led to the impossibility of crossing the truth of the claims and the expression of stupid theories. For example, an epigraphist named Paul Schafranke claimed in a lecture in 1995 that he deciphered the mixed script of ancient plates and that it tells an incredible remake of the first A, that the Greeks of Alexandria, fugitives of the now Roman-held Christian Empire, fled to the last bastion of the Phoenicians in Mauritania, and from there they all came to the Great Lakes to build their mixed and last kingdom. The Cretan DNA to the Indians. The only scientific we have in support of all Mediterranean colonization scenarios is the genetic study, Origins and Diffusion of Mitochondrial DNA Haplogroup X, 2003. You can see the reference here. It found that a high proportion, 7.2% of the mitochondrial DNA haplogroup X2 occurs in a similar proportion, up to 5%, in 20,000 North American Indian tribes. A similar Eurasian conclusion was reached by the University of Michigan's Cranial Comparative Study of 2001. Then in 2008, the work of a team of researchers from universities of Greece, the US, Canada, Russia, and Turkey, led by Aristotle professor Konstantin Triantafylidis, turned the project on genetic tracing even further. DNA-based Minoans had settled in Crete, coming from Anatolia, the places that in the 2nd millennium BC were captured by the Hittites. And then I remembered that Minos had married the witch princess of Colchis, Pasiphae. Would Colchis be the brotherly kingdom of expatriates Minoans? The script fits very well with Georgian epigraphists insisting that the language of the Phaistos disc is in the hierarchical script of ancient Colchis. And they get a new meaning for the extent of the Minoan seaside, what Orpheus had said in the Argonauts about escaping the Argonauts in the Baltic through the Dnieper, the Voristeni Dnieper, and lowering it to the island of the sister of the Medes, Criticus and Cricus. Will we rewrite the books? But are they enough to rewrite the history books? Forget Columbus was a Chioti. Columbus was a Chioti? Huh? Columbus was from the island of Chios of the Aegean Sea? I didn't know that. Anyway, and sink into the last of the Mohicans was a patriot. All right, not yet. Okay, some mummies were found in both the colonization area of the America and the Stonehenge neighborhood of England, may well illuminate the case, but we can only be sure if archaeologists formally rule that. Why, I asked Professor Mariolakos, since you are also a member of the Central Archaeological Council, you are not sending an archaeological mission to Lake Superior. It should have, since submerged ports projects have now been identified in the area. And he said, from a scientific standpoint, Greek scientists can complete the research work, and within a year or two we would have the answers. However, the KAS, the Archaeological Council of Greece, is an advisory council which does not formulate the ministry's research policy and therefore cannot make that decision. Apart from the ministry, there are also archaeological departments of the university, but in order to do so, we must first find the necessary resources, and on the other hand, our archaeologists want it and ask for it themselves. P.S. In addition to the aforementioned books and studies in the texts, the following are interesting sources: cultural interactions in Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean during the Bronze Age, 3000 to 500 BC, and the early Minoan colonization of Spain by W. Shepard Baird. And this is, I've translated this from an article on Diadrastika, and I hope you find it interesting. It's not just the fact that they took away 500 million tons of copper and found the copper mines empty, and left a little bit for the trinkets for the Indians to wear as jewelry. But they also found the Cretan, the Minoan Cretes, the ancient Crete, mitochondrial DNA in the DNA of the Native American Indians. I mean, there you have it. Plus the fact that they have all these writings, the artifacts, the engravings on the stones of the trireme, the ancient ships, the triremes and everything. So, plus the fact that Plutarch had described the fact that he had even gone to America around the year 86 AD. So, and exactly at the spring, between June 9th and July 9th. And he even talked about the stars above him at that point. It's amazing. Okay, so what do you think? Give me your comments. So this is definitely evidence, the DNA evidence, the fact that they had to take the copper for the kings of the Middle East, Israel, okay, and Pharaoh, and they had already had their shipping lanes up to the northern area of the British Isles, Scotland and Ireland, and from there it's a hop, skip, and a jump, as we said before, using the Gulf Stream going about 4 to 5 miles an hour just by using the Gulf Stream without even having, I guess, with their sails. So that's not bad. As far as ancient ships go, to be catching the currents and letting the currents take you. That's fantastic. Anyway, tell me what you think. This is fantastic news. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.